Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Beside Ourselves, a podcast on AI adoption. I'm Giles. Unfortunately, we don't have any Rutger today, but as always, I'm joined by Theo. Hi, Theo.
Hello. Hi, Giles. Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
Yeah, indeed. Great to be back for another episode. I think today's topic is, for me, hopefully it's a good one we're both excited to talk about, so hopefully we're ready to say. So how do I describe this? I'll set the scene for this one. So what I thought I'd like us to talk about today is focusing more on the tools and the platforms and our experiences with them, the good and the bad. And I've sort of labelled it the AI feature frenzy. And maybe if I give a little bit more explanation of that. So I think we've all noticed how every application we open now seems to have sprouted some AI assistant or other. Be that, our email client, our spreadsheet, even like
hardware.
Hardware, exactly.
Headphones,
our note-taking apps, will transform what we're doing. Everywhere seems to have it. And some of those are brilliant, like life-changing, but, they really revolutionize the way you work but there are some, and they solve real problems and they actually, help us save time and be more efficient, all the great stuff that we wanted to do. But there are others, let's just say they, kind of feel like they've been bolted on, they're kind of like the marketing team's gone, we need an AI feature and just call it AI. But I think that, that in itself is really causing confusion, particularly around the whole AI adoption thing about, what do we go? Yeah, everywhere you look, there's AI and what's worth it and what not. And I think the other thing as well that I've seen is that, when we think about the generative AI sort of side of stuff, everybody always thinks about ChatGPT. That's always the one people talk about, yes, and Google Gemini, I suppose you're in the Google ecosystem, but Copilot maybe, but there will always be one of the big players is what they think about. That's what everybody, but the reality is that they also set the bar. And therefore every other AI feature is kind of compared to them, unfairly or not. And I think that to me is I guess it's not causing confusion. It's kind of, well, I guess the big question is that fair or not? And actually, is there a whole discussion that we need to have around the whole user experience when it comes to using AI, particularly, I guess, for those solutions that are more niche? Yeah, we're rambling into it, but I guess what I thought between the two of us today, maybe we could kind of share our own experiences, try and untangle this mess, focusing on this whole user experience thing. And then how to, I guess through that is how to spot features that are generally useful or not. And, is that comparison fair or not? I don't know. It's a rather rambling introduction, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
It's a super interesting topic. And it's one that is very close to my heart because when I went to university, my first degree was in design and visual communication. And then I went into interaction design. So that's what started my career. So I've always thought myself as a designer. So this type of question is very close to my heart.
Okay, good.
Yeah, a really interesting development on the concept of user experience was from a few weeks ago when we launched a website for a healthcare provider.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of the user testing that we did was we heard from many users that they did not really want to see the AI right there in the front of the page. They were very happy to use its results. So in this case, it was something like a natural language search, so one of the features or a chat. So they were very happy with the results. So when the bot came back with a summary, but what they didn't want to see was in the very front, powered by AI. It was very, very telling in the way that actual users were telling us there is too much focus. There's too much spotlight on this. It's great. What it produces is very useful.
Yeah.
But there's a little bit too much focus on it. And perhaps a lot of the applications, a lot of the user interfaces that we want to look at are the ones that don't really put this out there. Bang! I'm an AI. It's more like, oh well, this is made with AI. It's very useful. It's a bit throwaway, but it will kind of help you understand and kind of make up a question. Maybe it's procedural, something like that. So yes, there is definitely a question of whether AI is overexposed and how that impacts the user experience. Don't you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it is also about whether AI is the most efficient answer to the problem. Because quite often, as you say, once you break down, I guess you're trying to take technology and apply it to a business problem, to a role, to try and basically improve our daily lives. And actually, just throwing AI at it is sometimes not the answer. To me, it's actually, you understand what the problem is, and actually you present a solution, and that may have AI or not, but actually leading with the chatbot, the open-ended, ask me a question. Again, you're probably more versed on UX than I am, but I think it's too open. We don't want to go to the other extreme where it's too prescriptive, but we do want to be able to guide people through that experience. So I think in some instances, particularly when you're looking at business problems, I think where the AI adds value and that chatbot adds value, it's like not a fallback. It's almost like the secondary things. I think the classic example, again, we talked about it before, is the kind of the meeting transcription. The AI is there working in the background, it's doing the job. It produces you the summaries and you engage with those summaries. And, for 80% of what you do, maybe even 90%, that's sufficient. It's done its job, and it's been driven by AI, but that's the way you interact with it. The chat's there if you want to dig deeper. Or maybe you want to ask a question like, I had that meeting with Theo back in November, or last year, towards the end of last year, Theo and I had this meeting, we discussed this. Can you remind? And it will go off and find that. But it's not my default entry. It is the kind of fallback option. And I think, again, I've seen this in a few projects recently and a few tools that I've seen, whereas people feel they have to. If you've got AI, you have to lead with that big, blank screen with a big text box saying, ask me anything. Yeah. And what invariably happens is people come in and ask it like they expect it to work like ChatGPT, and of course it doesn't. And of course you immediately fall at the first hurdle.
For me, on the UX side is, it feels needy. It's very funny. It's kind of like there is this prompt me. There's always a text box, right? Like, prompt me, ask me anything. I'm here to serve you, master. I kind of think of it a little bit sometimes like the Minions and Gru, kind of like, making all
I
these
was thinking
noises.
of it like the again, show our age here, but old Clippy back in the day on work. Yeah. You seem to be writing a CV. Can I help you?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Can I help? Can I help? And it's like, no, I'm just trying to write a document. Leave me alone.
Exactly.
I'll ask when I need the help.
Leave me alone. Exactly that. And the example that you mentioned, which I think in UX terms is probably one of the best ones that I've seen on on meeting transcription, is definitely a killer app for business, is that it does its job in the background. You don't have to ask it. You record the meeting, it will transcribe and give you a summary at the end, and you're thankful with it for the output, but you don't have to go prompting it all the time, right? So I just think that in terms of taking the spotlight off it, letting it hum in the background and everything, and not being quite so needy stuff is kind of like a good place to start with that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, we were talking before we started recording. I think, you see, and I mentioned at the outset, you see people just adding in AI for the sense of adding AI. And I won't name the manufacturer, but, the manufacturer of, and I've waved it and people can probably tell from the shape, but the manufacturer of my mouse, for instance, in the configuration app, there's AI in there. And I'm a bit like, do I really need AI in, and I'll be honest, I've never tried it because I'm a bit like, well, why do I need AI in my config tool for my mouse? But it's like, we have to be seen to have AI. So it just feels like that label slapped on there. It's just an unnecessary place. And I think one of the challenges I have is almost then AI overload. And all right, as a technologist, I'm probably an edge case, but I have now the situation where when I start a meeting, I have about 15 tools all shouting at me going, can I just transcribe your meeting? Like my email client wants to do it. I've got Notion wants to do it. I've got, the meeting provider, everything. And you just, it's just like little fireworks going off all over the screen. You're like, no, absolutely. I don't want you to. And these tools are falling over themselves to be helpful, which is good because obviously in that instance, I can go, yes, I do, click, and it's doing its job. But actually that kind of rush to kind of just add it everywhere. And I think, as you said before, I think that's adding the overload. And I think that's making it harder for people to think, well, which one do we go for?
Yeah. But in the kind of user interface world, what you're describing, it's called the cognitive load. Is essentially, instead of taking away parts of your job and kind of like just letting you go straight into the task, it's actually adding to the things that you need to consider before you start on a task, because it is everywhere, because it is labeled AI, do this with AI, which means that given everything, you have to think about, is this the right AI? Is this secure? Is this
Yeah.
energy efficient? So instead, by placing so much emphasis onto the fact that something is AI powered, instead of making your life easier, it is just adding to that cognitive load, and it's kind of essentially making you ask, do I need AI? Do I need this AI? Is there a better way to do this? And that's it. I mean, sometimes you just have to get out of that way
Yeah.
of thinking, and just kind of go straight into using the tool.
That's it. It's not the answer to everything. And I think the other thing as well from that sense, and this is something I consider, is the whole information security type of stuff. Because we talk about, it's the classic question. I'm sure you've heard it. It's like, oh, how secure is it? Should we be throwing all our information into ChatGPT or Claude, whatever? And of course, there's answers around data governance and where it's held and stuff like that. And, if you're paying for an account, there's anyway, there's all that kind of discussion. So, it's the right question to ask. But of course, a lot of these other tools, they're then hooking into the same models. Now, some of them will then allow you to then hook into your own sort of account. So let's take ChatGPT. Maybe you've got a ChatGPT corporate account, and therefore you can, but some of them won't. You'll still be using ChatGPT, but you're using it through their enterprise account. So all of a sudden, some of the benefits you get of bringing everything together, you kind of lose, because although you might be using ChatGPT and maybe 3 or 4 different tools, or OpenAI and 3 or 4 different tools, they're all disconnected. They're not using them. And then from a data governance perspective, you've got to think, well, actually, if I've got it in my app launcher, for instance, I use it from the keyboard, and it's like, well, actually, what's that? What am I sharing into that? And actually, if I push something through that, it's not going to the same place as if I push it through that. So there's a whole and I know we're moving away from the UX sort of stuff, which is what we want to talk about. But I think there's all those considerations as well. Yeah.
It's actually very much connected to user experience. In the very early days of SaaS and all these things, we had very generic applications, very generic looking applications. Then eventually, some of these applications developed out, and the companies that adopted them made them part of an ecosystem. And sometimes they brought the data into their own platforms, etc., so as to give their teams the experience of working within the operating system of the company. What you're describing now is a sense of disconnect, perhaps, where you're very clearly going out to an external application, which, with the added complexity of security issues, that it actually sounds intelligent. You almost feel guilty that you're kind of going over to another interface, giving it or discussing with it your company's secrets or proprietary information, rather than bringing it in. And I think that we'll be seeing a shift now, exactly like SaaS, with new application layers. We're using quite a few of them with our projects that actually feel a lot more at home. You build kind of like knowledge hubs and knowledge bases for the enterprise. They are not fully white labeled, but they are a little bit branded, bringing LLMs as needed, bringing in information from content repositories from the company, and giving you this entire experience that I'm actually working within the organization branded ecosystem, right? Rather than going out and I'm just using a generic label. It's the equivalent of, I don't know, I mean, Outlook is not a very good example over here, but SharePoint is a good example.
Yeah.
There is a vanilla look to SharePoint, but a lot of companies will customize it, at least to a certain extent, so that this entire ecosystem will look like it's part of the company. Yes. So they are connected for sure.
Yeah, and you are seeing, companies. Apple's a good and bad example, because obviously they've so far failed to really make a big splash with their AI. But their vision is that idea of, they will leverage the capabilities of these external models, be they ChatGPT, be they
I think
Google,
it's a clever strategy what they do, but it's a different episode. But yeah, it's a different episode.
Strategy. But then obviously, but they retain their own kind of walled garden, so they give you that confidence that actually everything's retaining, and then you will make the conscious choice to kind of step outside that. I mean, obviously, they've got trillions of dollars or billions of dollars they can throw at it, so it's a bit different. But it is I remember when they first launched it, everybody was like, "Oh, that's a really clever idea." Now, obviously, they failed to execute on that, or we'll see. Hopefully, everybody says in the next few months that might change, but it'll be interesting to see where that goes. What about
Yeah,
the comparison trap that between like your Chat GPTs and other AI tools? Do we think that's fair? I mean, I've got my opinions. I don't know what you think.
I think it is a fair question at some level, in the sense that the expectation is created, for sure. It is there was a first mover advantage. ChatGPT moved in. It set expectations of how it should work. It is fair for users to expect that level of intelligence, that level of conversation from their own tools. So, I mean, if you're going to make a tool and you use a substandard LLM, so the conversation is not quite as natural, yeah, you can expect pushback or slower adoption. On the other hand, um, ChatGPT, without connection to any of the internal tools, without kind of being part of your organization, is just too generic, right? It does not know anything.
Yeah.
It lacks that context of what your company does. So a bit of both, I suppose, is my conclusion. You should expect the same level of competence from a company LLM, but at the same time appreciate the fact that it's for a different task.
Yeah.
You should also look at the safety example. I mean, when we were deploying an AI solution for a finance company, we very pointedly had to demonstrate that if you were to ask it something irrelevant, like what should I make for dinner tonight,
Yes.
it should stop and just not answer that question. It should basically
Yeah.
say, look, I'm not going to go there. I'm only looking at financial data over here. And I think that customers found that reassuring.
Yes.
They found that like there are limits here. This thing a tool for a job rather than a generic one. So I think it's a reasonable expectation from users, but the trap is there, and I can see how it can create kind of adoption obstacles.
Yeah,
What
and
do
I
you
think it's
think?
no, I completely agree. I think it's a fine balance, isn't it? Because it's like, if I'm again, if I'm using a ChatGPT, or if I'm using an AI tool, say it's in my finance system, or Microsoft Business Central, for instance, and I want to ask it questions, then it's reasonable that I expect it to be able to process and respond to those questions based upon the data that was within that system. So, the finance data, the project data, whatever. But it's also reasonable that, if I ask it about, a recipe for dinner, then it's also, it should be fair that turns around and says, well, that's not, that's not my focus here. My focus is very specifically on that. And I think that's it. It is that kind of tuning of the of the model to actually where do you, because sometimes you can put too many constraints on it and then all of a sudden it's going, I can't, overinterprets and goes, I can't do that. I have seen other examples, I've heard of other examples where, and exactly as interesting you picked out the recipe one, because it was that particular example where guardrails were put in that said, oh no, you shouldn't go out of that. But actually if you then pressed it and said, oh please can you answer that, it goes, oh okay, you've asked nicely, I'll do it. So actually it's almost trying to, it's like, oh the guardrails are there, but this person obviously really wants and I want to help it. So the other analogy that sprang to mind was actually, this is very similar to how 15, 20 years ago, when I was doing a lot of website deployment also in the healthcare space, people would always compare website search to Google. They go, well, it doesn't work like Google does. And it's like, well, Google's a $1 trillion business that has thousands of servers that's constantly crawling, whereas you're just playing, but it is true, there is a level, and it's actually what's that acceptable level. And I think that's where, coming back to the UX side of stuff, it really helps, because actually using the UX, you need to clearly set those expectations.
Totally.
And just having the way you, again coming back to what we said, just having an empty window of a chat box in it is kind of, even just that kind of visual layout, is like, it just asks me anything, whereas actually if the chat bot is placed in the context, again, coming back to the example I talked about for the meeting notes, the chat bot exists within the meeting notes. It's almost, from a UX perspective, it's, you make that association when I'm asking it about this. I'm never tempted to ask my meeting note transcriber about recipes, because I know that I'm talking to it about my meetings. I will ask it questions about my meetings. So yeah, I think the UX has a massive part to play in that process.
It does. There is it's a good point to make here, that there is, when we interact with systems, we roughly, and it's not black and white, it's a range, it's a spectrum, but we are usually in two modes. We're in browsing mode and we're in doing mode. And in
Yes.
browsing mode, we're a little bit more laid back. We're point and click. We read a lot. We take in, maybe we watch a video. The interaction is simple signals from us as humans, as a point and click, and richer information coming back from the screen. An extreme version of that is watching telly. You're watching television, basically, you just use a remote, click, I was going to say put the channel on, but again, we're kind of showing our age, but you put it on, like you sit back and watch.
Yeah.
Exactly. On the other side, when you're in doing mode, you're creating content all the time. You and I are doing this right now.
Yeah.
Other times you're writing a document and everything. And somewhere in there, in that continuum, is using a chatbot. It's before, so it's definitely a lot more involved than just browsing mode because you're doing something.
Yes.
But it is not quite actually as intensely creation mode or as creating a document or having a conversation. So it's before that. And therefore, systems need to be designed with that parameter in mind. Don't make it so intrusive, like, always be there when I'm writing context. I mean, things like Grammarly, I find it a little bit too intrusive, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to be fine-tuned because it's there when you're writing content. On the other hand, you want it to be a little bit more visible than just taking in a website. It should have its own UI. I particularly like, for good examples, I particularly like Notepad for example, from Google. It's a full screen interface, 3 panels, all these things. It's very immersive in that way. It's a doing interface. Less so with other systems. So for example, if you go to a website, you always have got that chat link at the bottom. I do not understand why that little chat link needs to be open and with somebody pinging me to ask me anything. It's kind of like, dude, it's usually a dude. Go away. I'll ask you when I need you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I completely get you, and I think where it's most successful to me, and I'm thinking I've got a few examples of like writing apps I use and stuff like that, is where it sits alongside, but it's not embedded in. So if I'm working in a document, it's not in the document with me unless I invite it in. So if I say to you, can you proofread this for me? Can you check my spelling? But I have to, it's not embedded in the document. There are almost two things. There's the document I'm working on, and then there's the panel on the right-hand side that might be where I'm saying, can you check to make sure my grammar's correct and stuff like that. Whereas you're right. Whereas in Grammarly, obviously, because of the nature of the tool will embed itself directly in the document with you. A bit like the old, paperclip used to be. And I think from that, if I think about the tools I use the most and I get the most out of, it's those where it is like, we understand the task you're here to do and we're getting out of the way to allow you to do that. But when you need us, we're here beside you to kind of, ask those questions and stuff like that. And I think that's, that to me is a metaphor that seems to be working and working really well. So, I did start the timer, and we're literally running down. We've got 8 seconds left, so we're.
Very good.
It's probably, and I was a bit late starting it, so we probably have run our usual 20 minutes. I guess if we're continuing with that. There it is, really loud. I did turn the volume down, thinking it wasn't going to be quite that loud, but there we go.
Oh, you did. No, but now it's a defining feature.
Exactly, defining feature.
It's a podcast with the alarm halfway. Like,
yeah, we probably think about having fireworks going off in the background and stuff like that, don't we? But
very good, yeah.
But no, that, again, as always, an interesting discussion that we could go on for. But I guess closing thoughts, remarks as we wrap up.
Yeah. Very exciting from the UX space, from the design space. I can see the fact that it is only just beginning. I think that the first metaphors and fixed ideas of how we design an AI user experience are beginning to solidify, whether it is the chat interface or the sparkles or any of these things. But I sense that we are at the early stages of that visual language. And I look forward to being part of the cohort of professionals that will get to kind of shape it over the coming years. This is really exciting times for somebody with a design background.
Yeah, no, great. And couldn't agree more with that. I think the other thing we didn't really touch on, I think, is as we move more into the more agentic workflows and stuff like that, again, how we sort of incorporate those into those things. We've talked more about those kind of generative stuff that sits alongside or, maybe frustratingly embedded.
The visual language of agents is so interesting.
Exactly.
Just starting with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Totally right.
And I think that's going to be because there's a whole confidence thing. And again, the way we present those, the way we surface those is going to be massive, and that's going to be a real interesting factor on there. But that's, again, a whole other episode, as always.
Whole other episode.
As we do. Well, thanks a lot, Theo, for joining, for being with me again today. We're a dynamic duo. And thanks, everybody, for listening. As always, if you have any feedback, anything you want to share, then obviously all the links to where you can do that. Maybe you disagree with what we're saying, and by all means, we'd love to hear it. Or maybe there's a follow-up question, or there's a tool that you think works really well that you'd like us to highlight, or those that you think is very bad. Feel free to chuck them in the comments and all the usual places, and we'll be sure to mention them the next time. But yeah, thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back with another episode very soon. And I guess, as we always say, we are beside ourselves to have you with us.
We are.
And yeah, thanks very much for listening. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Cheers, guys.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.